It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, our guest is CEO Susan Lintonsmith. Susan is an accomplished business leader with nearly 30 years of success in generating sales and profit growth in global assignments in both public and private industries. She is currently president and chief executive officer for Quiznos, which she joined in July of 2012 as the global chief marketing officer and became president and CEO in July of 2016. Susan has her MBA in marketing and finance from Indiana University and her Bachelor's of Business Administration from the University of Notre Dame. Susan Lintonsmith, welcome into the corner office.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about your parents, brothers and sisters, what part of the country you came from.
All right. Well, it's an interesting background. I actually grew up in Denver, where I am right now, so it's been fun to be back where I grew up.
Yeah, full circle.
So I am the youngest of four. There were four of us in 6 years, and I'm the only girl. So the reason I bring that up is you would expect for me to be extremely spoiled, being the only girl and the youngest. But I think for everybody who has older brothers, you can appreciate that.
You had to fight for your mashed potatoes,
Oh my
I'm
goodness,
sure.
they definitely pushed me as a kid, and I have to credit them as we talk about, kind of the path and journey to the CEO seat. I have to, give them a shout out because they really did prepare me better than anyone else for the business world.
That's great. Well, tell us about your parents. Were they both working? Go to college? What was a little bit about them?
Yeah, so my dad went to college and he was a mechanical engineer. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and then she ended up working once I was in high school. But she was the person who made sure that she ran us around and got us every place, which I can fully appreciate as a working mother, how difficult it is. I only have two, and she had to deal with four.
And it's exponential, right?
Yeah.
With that many.
And especially since, I was a competitive figure skater, so I was at the ice rink all the time.
Sure,
and
early mornings.
Yeah. And then all four of us had classical piano lessons, so taking us to piano every Tuesday. So, no, but my parents, they were great. The one thing that they taught us really early on, though, is responsibility. They told us very early, you all are responsible for paying your college tuition.
Wow.
Yeah. And, they did pay room and board, so they did pay a little bit, but they were not in the position to pay our college tuition. And believe it or not, all four of us did go to Notre Dame, and it was a lot more reasonable back then than some of the tuitions are today. But that taught us, so we all started working as early as we could and we learned to save. And I really think that background helped to propel all four of us into, what we're all doing today.
Right. Well, that's a pretty important message. Did that start when you were in elementary school or middle school? When did mom and dad begin to communicate that if you want to go to college, you better save your coins?
Because I was the youngest, I saw it with my brother.
Right. It already
So
filtered down. So you knew right away, right?
I knew, and I was such a saver. So I started very early on at age 11, believe it or not, because I was very, very tiny, but I was babysitting already. And
Good for you.
Yeah. So I started at age 11, and then I was folding papers for my brothers for a penny a paper,
There we go.
And then I got my first real job in restaurants when I was about 15 years old.
Wow. Fast food, or what were you doing behind the counter?
It was a mom and pop Italian Mexican restaurant, and at first I would take delivery and to-go orders, and then I became a server. So I spent most of my high school and college years as a server.
Right. So the fast food experience started very early on.
It sure did.
Well, you talked about responsibility. What other types of lessons or influences did your parents have on you growing up?
They were big on, integrity. They taught us all to really work hard in school. They really did. They didn't sit on us and say, you have to do your homework, like sometimes I feel as a mom today. It was just the expectation that you got to do your part. You've got to help out around the house. You've got to get your homework done. You've got to work, and you've got to do volunteer work. So they really did, teach us very early on. We had to have a lot of integrity. We had to give back. Just really gave us the foundation to be really well-rounded, individuals.
Real good core values, it sounds like.
Yes,
there.
absolutely.
Yeah. Were you a good student?
I was.
Top of your class?
I was number 2.
All right.
I wasn't the top, but she's still my really, really good friend. But
Valedictorian. That's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I'm a geek all around. I really did study hard.
Cool. Well, you mentioned ice skating and also, was it piano, right? Classical piano. What other types of things were you doing outside of class?
Most of my spare time was spent working in the restaurants. I worked about 35 hours during the school year, which is, that's tough. That's a
lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That started during middle school, or that was high school, I guess, at 15?
That started in my freshman year. So because it was right before I turned 15.
Yeah.
So I had to be extremely disciplined. I figure skated until I was a freshman. My knees were horrible, and I ended up having to leave it when I was a freshman, but took piano all the way through to my senior year. Also was in great books. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where you read different novels that are a couple of years beyond your grade, and then you get together with like kids from other schools, and you have somebody who leads it, an adult who leads it, and you discuss the books.
What were some of your favorite books early on, in those elementary and middle school years?
I remember The Outsiders, and that was before the movie. I just remember that one being really interesting. And then Island of the Blue Dolphin, the Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn.
Right.
All of those I remember reading in grade school, which, I really enjoyed.
Adventure.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Sounds like there's a lot of adventure there. Awesome. And we talked a little bit about your work, folding papers for a penny a paper. I love that. Did all your brothers have paper routes, or was one specific brother that you were working for?
Well, it was the oldest. He always set the stage for all of us, and then it got passed down. But when my third brother broke his femur, it was in a body cast. I ended up taking over the paper route. But my brothers were happy on the weekends to have me get up and fold the papers early and get their bikes ready, and then I would go and collect. This is back in the day when you actually had to go around the neighborhood.
Right. Knocked on doors. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, I did that as well. Right.
You did? Okay.
Customer service, right? Or knock on the door and ask to be paid.
It's crazy. So they would send me around because they would see me, and then they wouldn't yell at me, but they would say, "Hey, could you ask your brother not to put the paper on the roof anymore?"
That's great.
But I always got
better. So they knew
tips.
that you weren't delivering; that you were collecting for them.
I think so. Yes.
And then, were you able to get the tips, or did they give you a portion of them?
Well, actually, I passed them on to them because they gave me a set fee. I should have negotiated better.
Oh, got it. Your brothers were pretty astute businessmen, it sounds like, early on.
They were. They owe me money.
Yeah, they do. I love it. And then, of course, as you said, fast food through your high school years.
Yes.
So you started about 15. Did that continue through college as well in terms of your...
It did.
Yeah, cool.
It did. So in college, it was a little different. I had to, I went away, and then I worked in food service at one of the boys' dorms. We had... girls and boys dorms, and I always worked in the food service in the boys dorms, which, helped the social life too.
So University of Notre Dame, great school. Did you grow up? So you lived your whole high school year in Colorado. What made you choose Notre Dame as your high school or college of choice?
Yeah, so my older brother went there first, and when we went for graduation weekend, he actually got married and graduated in the same weekend.
Oh,
It was one of those
wow.
beautiful days in South Bend, Indiana, and I walked around the campus and I just said, "This is where I want to go." Right.
Awesome. So when you went to college, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do at that time?
I had more of an idea of what I didn't want to do.
Mm,
I knew I wasn't going to be an engineer,
yeah,
right?
right.
So but no, I didn't. I thought I could be a doctor. There's so many things I thought I could be, but what I really enjoyed was working in this restaurant. It was just, and I worked in several during the summers. Like I'm the crazy person who would work 60, 70 hours a week in the summer, and I had to get two jobs. So,
Did you stay in South Bend or did you return to Colorado?
I would return to
Okay,
Colorado.
got it.
So,
So the
so
job was there.
yeah. So when I went, and they would always take me back every summer, which was great. And they took me, I actually worked during like Christmas holidays and whenever I was spring break. So kind of crazy that I could go get some hours and people were happy to take off and give me their hours. But when I went to Notre Dame and I had to declare a major, I did say, well, you know what, I like what I'm doing. I was very close friends with the entrepreneurs who had opened this restaurant. And I said, this is business and this is what I want to do. So that's how I kind of signed up for business.
Yeah.
And then my senior year, I was a resident assistant. And then for a couple years, I was a teacher's assistant. In all things, I was a statistics assistant, which is,
Ah.
if that just makes me sound like a geek.
Well, you said you weren't, into engineering, but you had to have some financial acumen, right? And science background there.
A little, but I really respected that professor. And I thought I struggled to get through the class, and then he surprised me by asking me to stay with him and and help others. So.
Well, I know you went on to get your MBA. Now, was that straight out of Notre Dame, or was there some full-time work experience once you got out of college?
It was straight through. So I was at Notre Dame my senior year, knew I wanted to get my MBA. I was one of the few at Indiana University who didn't have a couple years of work experience. I think they termed us rollovers.
Right.
But
I remember that term.
But for me, it was, I definitely knew I wanted to hit that stepping stone to get into, at the time I was going to go directly into packaged goods from grad school. And then lo and behold, I end up back in restaurants with Pizza Hut, which was owned by PepsiCo at the time.
So that was your first job out of MBA school?
That's correct.
Got it. Cool. And did you go into the marketing side straight away? I know that's where the majority of your career has been.
Yes. Yep, that's exactly right.
And were you managing people from the get-go, or did Pizza Hut in those days kind of put you in individual contributor types of modes before they gave you people responsibility?
No, they had a really good process where it was more individual contributor, and you worked your way up from assistant marketing manager to associate to manager. And as you moved up in, titles, that's when you started to assume responsibilities for people responsibilities.
Tell us about the first time you started managing somebody.
Yeah. The time I had the most people, and I was in my late 20s, I was still with Pizza Hut. I was promoted to director of marketing, and several agencies, several people who had previously been my counterparts and my friends. And I tell you, it was interesting, but it did help to form my leadership style, because I learned some good things about what to do and what not to do. But that was interesting, because I will tell you straight up, I was single at the time, absolutely a workaholic. I would turn the lights on in the morning, turn them off at night, and just that was my life, was working. And I think I had unrealistic expectations that everybody should keep those hours. So I learned through making some mistakes. I look back now and I just laugh, but but I learned how to be a better leader and not expect people to, do exactly as I was doing, which probably wasn't healthy. And I also learned how to motivate and empower. And I think one of my biggest lessons early on is I was a great doer. Boy, I could execute and implement, and I had to learn that, pretty early in my career to, because I was given such a, huge opportunity, I couldn't do it all. And I had to learn to step back and to learn how to be more of a strategic leader and to empower and to delegate.
Right, right. That's a very important lesson to learn early on. Did you, when you first started managing people, was it a little apprehensive? Was there some fear there, or did you kind of move into it in a confident way, feeling that, oh, thank goodness, now I've got people to help me accomplish my goals?
I was fearless back then. I was fearless.
Sounds like it.
It's kind of ignorance is bliss. So I was extremely happy. No, I honestly, I took it on. I was excited about it. I was really excited, and I loved it. I'm pretty social. I'm pretty outgoing, and I really loved working with a team. I was already working with a lot of people at the agency who were, they're an extension of your team, and we had it was really a wonderful situation. But I learned the importance of communicating, of empowering, delegating. You learn all of those really important things, and motivating. So I learned early on before I even hit 30, and I
All good
really
lessons.
credit some of my managers or my bosses at Pizza Hut for enabling me to have that kind of an experience so early on in my career.
Well, you set me up for my next question, which was really, what have you learned from the bosses you've had in the past?
I think you learn from the good ones, and I think you learn from the ones that frustrate you the most, right?
Sure, absolutely. Maybe more from the latter.
Yeah, you do, but you do learn. I was very fortunate. I had a couple of very good bosses early on, and one is my dear friend today. He was what I learned from him is I saw this guy really. He worked very hard too, but he would give others credit. And back in the day, it was, especially when you're in a very competitive culture. Um, people didn't always give credit to others. I saw people more taking credit, and I looked at this guy, and he would be like, "Oh, Susan did this," and he really did reward people and recognize people, and I saw how, I love that.
How
So I
motivating
learned
that
that.
was for you.
Oh, very motivating. One thing I learned, though, growing up, in corporations, I always wondered why the head people didn't ask some of us who were at more junior levels what was going on and what we thought.
Interesting.
Because I thought if they just asked us, we know what's happening if they just asked us. So that's one thing I've taken into my job today here at Quiznos is making sure that people know, tell me what I need to know.
Do you do kind of occasional lunches where you pull in, this entry level folks and sit down with them in an open setting, or how do you go about getting that information?
It's more walking around, talking to people. It's more, yeah, and it's more when I stand up in front of our team here in Denver, saying, tell me what I need to know. Being very open and asking. I do ask for advice, and I do ask for opinions, and I think that's important. One lesson I learned, and I do want to bring this up, is the same, different boss, same company. I was doing new products, and we had a test that did not go well. And I wrote a memo summarizing, just like we do always, right? And my boss kept making me rewrite it. And he kept saying, you can't give bad news. You've got to make this more happy and more good news. And I got to tell you, we ended up launching this new product nationally with TV, everything else, and it
It
failed.
failed. Oh, gosh. Devastating experience.
And the CMO came back to me. Yeah, the CMO came back to me and said, "What happened?"
Do
And
you
I
want to see
said,
my first draft? How
"Yeah."
did you how did you
So
deal with that,
as
Susan?
you know what, I was very honest and said, we were not as forthright. We were trying to paint the positive, but it didn't work that well. But I made sure I took that lesson with me, and you don't beat up the messenger, right? You reward those people who come to you and tell you what you need to know. But the other thing is they got to come with solutions. I mean, don't come with just problems, but come with solutions. But tell the executives, because I always say I can fix it if I know about it. If I don't know about it, I can't fix it.
Susan, how's your leadership style evolved over time?
Well, part of it is I've really matured in understanding how to delegate and motivate others. One thing is I have become more of a direct communicator. I've always been very growing up in my household, we were all very direct, and nobody ever had to wonder what somebody was thinking. But I did have to learn to kind of soften or direct it a little differently. So one thing is making sure that I keep a positive attitude, directly communicate what's going on, and make sure everybody knows. I don't think anybody should ever raise their hand and say, I have no idea what we're focused on. I have no idea what our priorities are. I want to make sure it's really clear, crystal clear to everybody. I've learned to listen more. I'm quite an opinionated person. I think most people are.
You're still fighting for those mashed potatoes.
Yes. So, but and that hasn't changed. I always have thoughts and opinions, but I've learned to sit back, ask questions, and listen.
Was there a seminal event for you where you'd say that, that really came across, in other words, maybe advising or observing someone that you admired that was a good listener, or maybe got feedback from someone else? Tell us a little bit about how you came across that, because that is a very important skill set, for somebody in the corner office.
I think it came more from, as there's always a lot of turnover at the top, as I've seen leaders come in, new people. It always kind of frustrated me a bit when they came in with all the answers and they didn't seek knowledge. That was a big thing at Red Robin. One of the cornerstones and one of the culture was to listen and seek knowledge before providing your perspective. And I think that's where I probably grew the most in this area. But seeing people come in, and
it was more of a company culture thing.
It was a company culture, and then the experience I've had seeing leaders come in and just think they have all the answers, and you're like, you know what, we really do have some good understanding. So I always said to myself, when I'm in that position, I will ask, and I will give, because I think that's really important and something that frustrated me growing up. So now I tell people, I have my opinions, but you can absolutely change my mind with facts and reason. You tell me, you show me, and they have changed my mind, because hey, I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, and so I don't have all the answers. That's why we're all teams, right?
Yeah, awesome. You don't mind not being the smartest person in the room, it sounds like.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Do you recruit against that? Do you try to find people, particularly with other areas of discipline and expertise, that, obviously have a subject matter expertise that you may not have mastered?
Yeah, how I do recruit is looking for somebody who is, willing to tell the emperor they have no clothes, right? But more importantly, I really recruit and look for, positive attitudes, kind of that can-do attitude, people who are resilient. I do look for people who have made an impact. So when I look at a resume and when I do an interview, I'm like, tell me about a time in your past job or the one that you're in right now where you made a positive impact, you made a difference. If you hadn't been there, something would not have happened. Because I think that also tells you, somebody who is proactive and really does work hard and make a difference.
Yeah, no, that's very important. We're talking a little bit about interviewing folks, and one of my favorite questions is, when you're making bets on people, what do you look for in them? You're going to invest in them. It's not just their salary and the benefits, but it's the time. It's your time. It's the organization's time. What are some of those things that are just kind of must-haves for people that you bring into your organization, whether it's at the C-suite or on the front line?
Yeah, because you assume that everybody you bring in has the right background, right? They have the right resume, or they wouldn't have made the cut in the first place.
Hopefully, by the time they're seeing you, that's the case, right?
Exactly. So putting those assumptions aside, I really do look for people who have the right attitude, people who are passionate. You can tell when they talk about what they're doing, that they really are excited about it. I love that. People who, like I said, really do make an impact, and they can tell you in the past, here's what happened and here's what I did. And not just the I. I do look for people who are talking about, teams and yes, we all make our individual contributors and make an impact, but people who are real and can work with others well and are problem solvers. I love idea people and people who have, the skill set to problem solve. So those are some real things that I look for. Yeah.
Yeah, very important. It's interesting you mentioned passion because it's been a very common denominator in these CEO podcast interviews where people have said, that's really important. And I know in my own hiring experience when I was on the corporate side of the table and then also in recruiting, it's kind of like, give me an ounce of passion for a pound of brains, someone who's really very interested to make things happen. And it's interesting to hear that's a common characteristic with you as well. So you mentioned passion and problem solving. Anything else that you think is kind of a must have, regardless of the position that they might be in or coming into in your organization?
I think it's important that they can work with other people. I mean, not always do we get to select exactly who we work with, and somebody who just has a bent for creatively solving problems. If they can lead teams, work with teams, and then really come up with some great, solutions to business issues, I think that's fantastic. But attitude and passion, those are huge.
Very important. How do you decide, Susan, when it's time to micromanage and when it's time to stay out of the sandbox, particularly with maybe some of your direct reports?
That's a great question. When things are going well and my direct reports are being extremely proactive and they're bringing things to me, and then I can stay out. I grew up in marketing. I do not need to get involved with the head of marketing now. He was my VP. I totally trust him. I don't get involved. He's fantastic. So, but where I see something not working well, or that's when I will, you want to empower, but at the same time, sometimes you have to make changes or you have to dive in. So it typically is where there's issues, problems, or it's just not as productive or working as well as possible. And at Quiznos, we just recently, restarted our training program, and we know through a couple of our franchisees that it wasn't ideal. So that's where, you jump in and say, okay, let's regroup, let's fix this. And so I was a little more hands-on then, and now the team has taken it and they are like, okay, we got it. And then I will back out. Yep.
Yeah. Good. Let's talk a little bit about company culture. You've referred to it a couple of times. What are your thoughts on building a company culture and the role that the CEO plays in doing so?
Yeah, I think culture is one thing. You can put it on paper and say, guys, this is our culture. But I think the CEO and the leaders really have to lead by example. So for me, I think it's important. We are a franchise company. Quiznos is 99.9% franchise. So it's about being franchise and service centric. And so how I try to live that is to be very responsive to franchisees, talk about franchisees as, we're here to service them. We're not here if they're, yeah, it really is partners, but to live that and show that to them and show a lot of respect for franchisees when they call, email, etc., and how we talk about them. I really do. I have a plaque, my personal mantra is attitude is everything, making sure that you keep that positive attitude. It's I didn't come up with this one, but you can't control the winds, but you can adjust the sails. That's why I try to, things are going to happen, right? So it's making sure that you have that all in winning attitude, and you just don't give up, and you just, you just you persevere. And really more agile and entrepreneurial. So if people have great ideas, let them run with it.
Right.
That's part of our culture, and for the senior team to just enable that, and then to reward and recognize people who go above and beyond. All of those are critically important. And then last is, we're one team, right? It's not, hey, we're company, their field, their franchisees. It's like, nope, we're all one team. It's called Team Quiznos, and making sure that I communicate that and live that myself.
Yeah. Very important. You've had some wonderful assignments and great companies through the years. Coke, Western Union, which was a little bit out of the the fast food chains. Red Robin now at Quiznos. What would you say is unusual about your culture at Quiznos? Maybe comparing, contrasting to some of those other larger and as well as middle market companies you've worked for.
Quiznos has a great culture. I have to tell you, it's a tough business environment, and we like I said, we are almost 99% franchise. So you really can't control the experience in the restaurants, right? So the brand that people experience is really dependent on that franchisee and their team members within those four walls. So it really is about making sure that you influence and partner and communicate as much as possible and are very, very clear on the priorities and the vision. The thing that's a little bit different and I love about our culture here is we really are one team. We all are in this together, right? It's we have a business and the environment that's tough. We've had a couple of tough years in the past. Everybody's on the same page and we're rowing in the same direction. And I think that's important. I've seen other cultures where you don't always see the executive team or you don't always see the team members all acting as one and acting entrepreneurial. And I believe we're doing that here.
My daughter Rose Crew at Dartmouth, and she did it through high school. And, in so many ways, the CEO is like the coxswain. The coxswain is the one that's out there, saying, get the stroke right, get your people in place. And the coxswain really can't take much of a different change if the person decides to either catch a crab or, not pay attention. But, it's beautiful. I don't know if you're a rowing fan, but, to see a boat that just runs smoothly through the water, almost if it's gliding on top of it, is mostly due to the fact that you've got great leadership and people that can follow and really, as you said, feel as if they're on the same team. It's a beautiful thing.
That paints a perfect picture of how I see leadership and how I see teamwork. I mean, when it's done right, it is beautiful, and that's a great picture that you painted. And if it's done wrong, you know it. Everybody knows it.
You know it. Also, wait a second. Which direction are we going?
You can't have the person in the back of the boat splashing and
That's right. Not paying attention.
And I've been on those teams, and that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good.
Absolutely. Let's loop back to some of the interview areas that you spoke about earlier. Susan, one of the things we love to ask is if you had 5 minutes, only 5 minutes to interview someone, and it was a very important job, what would you ask them?
If I only had 5 minutes, I would ask them, tell me what you're most proud of.
Yeah.
And that could be personally, it could be professionally, but explain to me, go through it. What are you most proud of and why? And you see the passion, the attitude, and it's great when people talk about what they're proud of, because then you're going to get an idea for what kind of work ethic they have and what's really important to them.
What are some of your other favorite interview questions?
I can tell you one I'd never ask.
That's good too.
One I was asked always growing up is, where do you see your career in 5 to 10 years, and map out your life? And it's like, it's sometimes.
Give me a break.
Yeah,
who knows?
Sometimes life has a way of throwing a curveball and saying, really? Is that what you thought you were going to be doing? But no, I really do. I like them to tell me about what kind of culture they thrive in and what frustrates them and what really energizes and motivates them as well. So when you talk to them about what was your absolute favorite job and what was your least favorite and why, then you kind of get the idea of will they fit culturally? Because I do believe that it's really important to go to a company where the culture matches what kind of motivates you personally. If I can tell you, when I first started at PepsiCo or with Pizza Hut, I love the culture. You did a great job. You worked hard. You got the results. You got rewarded. I love that cause and effect kind of, and then you could move up quickly if you performed, and they empowered you really early on. And to me, that really went with my with my what I love and my personality. they told me, they said, we don't have this really great training program. We're going to have to throw you out in the ocean and see if you can swim. And I'm like,
so I've been doing that my whole life.
Yeah, I'm like, great. That's perfect. That's me.
Awesome. Susan, you've been very generous with your time. Just one last question as we sign off here. What career and life advice would you give to someone who maybe has their eyes on the corner office?
That's a great question. When I was at Indiana University speaking to some of the MBA students, the one thing I told them, and I mean it, is do what you love and love what you do. If you really are passionate about what you're doing, you're going to enjoy it so much more. That, and really keep a great attitude. I know I've said that a couple times, but I do believe keeping a great attitude and having that can-do approach is really two key things. Loving what you do, having a great attitude. I think that's going to help people in life. I love the people too who are proactive and say, give it to me. Let me take it on. And that's what happened to me early on, and how I kind of rose rapidly through the ranks. Is I had that attitude, and I love that. If you're wanting to get to the corner office, really stand out and make an impact, and step out there. So those are things I would say.
We had another CEO that said, I was very proactive about taking things on that other people didn't want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And making your mark with them. That's huge. Yeah.
Can I tell you how much I appreciate those people? I have a couple here at Quiznos where, I'm thinking of two people in particular that just are like, I'll take that on.
Anything.
I'll do it. You see the others that, you see those people, don't make eye contact, don't make.
Cross their arms.
Yeah. These people just say, give it to me. I'll get it done. And it's like, those are your can-do people, your go-to people. That's really what you're looking for in the business world, or in and that's the person who's going to at some point continue to get promoted when that position comes available.
Susan Lintonsmith, thank you so much for your time today and telling us about your journey into the corner office. We really appreciate it, and we wish you the best of success in your career at Quiznos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.